This is the Money Hour with your host, Tina Mitchell, on Alternative Talk, AM 1150. Now, back to the show with local mortgage and finance expert, Tina Mitchell.
Welcome back to the Money Hour with your host and mortgage expert, Tina Mitchell, right here on 1150 AM KKNW, the Saturday, May 24th show. Each week, I share expert advice and inside knowledge on how today's events in our local economy can affect your money. If you're hearing my show at a different time or day, you're listening to a rebroadcast, but we are here to answer any questions that you have or to connect you with any of my guests that I have in studio today. Please call the show at 1-855-400-1150. Again, that's 1-855-400-1150 or online at themoneyhour.com. In studio right now, Nicole Mangino with Windermere Real Estate and Debbie Walter with RE/MAX Northwest Realtors. If you're a seller, you're probably looking for ways to maximize your potential profits. If you're a buyer, you need to know the seller's strategy so you can actually get the best price for your home. And that's why I've invited Nicole and Debbie in studio today. Thanks so much, you guys, for coming in.
Thank you. Exciting to be here.
And normally I just interview one person at a time, so we'll have a little conversation with the two of them, so this will be a lot of fun. Just a little background about Nicole. Today, I'm excited to have Nicole in studio, an expert in her field. She has 16 years experience in the local real estate market, working with both buyers and sellers in a variety of market conditions. Committed to excellence, Nicole holds many advanced education designations within the real estate industry, is very active in her local community, and also coaches and trains other real estate agents throughout the country. She is truly dedicated to using the very best systems and strategies in her business to help her clients achieve their real estate goals in this current real estate environment. And Debbie Walter, RE/MAX Northwest Realtors. Debbie has been a real estate broker for over 12 years. RE/MAX Platinum Club Hall of Fame Lifetime Achievement, Women's Council of Realtors Entrepreneur of the Year for 2013, and Women's Council of Realtors President-elect for 2014. Debbie is number 8 Individual Pacific Northwest Region for 2013. Seattle 5-star Best Real Estate Agent 7 years running in top 5%, and staging professional. Debbie works with predominantly engineers and physicians both in the Seattle and East Side area. Quite a bio for both of you, and that's why you're here. I'm just excited. I know both of you personally as well through the Women's Council of Realtors, and it's just exciting to have you in studio and share your wealth of information. So let's go ahead and start out with a pricing strategy. Should you list your home for an attractive price to get buyers in? What about pricing a little bit more to hope to get a better, a higher price, or list it a little bit less than what you're seeing your competition? What is your advice on listing strategy for my sellers?
You know, it's a fine line, right? Because even in today's market, it's an appreciating market, but you can overprice a property. And if you do, you will miss out on a substantial amount of it. That being said, I fully understand a seller does not want to feel like they left money on the table. Mm-hmm. So I don't tend to underprice it, but you price it right in line where everybody else is so that the buyer feels like they're getting a value. You get the most interest and activity when you first come on the market, when you're the hot commodity, and we are in a market where there are more buyers than sellers. So if you can price it right, you'll be able to generate that extra activity and a lot of times get multiple offers, which allows you to leverage up that price.
Definitely. And one of the sayings that I have every day is that really in this market, you don't have to fear about underpricing, but you definitely have to fear overpricing. So if a seller comes to us and they're looking at the last recent comparable and they want to tag on an extra $20,000, that's really, really very dangerous, because what will happen is buyers will perceive that property to be overpriced. And in this market, if you're sitting on market after your first weekend, buyers perceive you to be overpriced or something wrong with the house.
And you know, it's funny. It depends on the site that you're in, because I tell people you need to ask your agent and exactly what to do and follow their lead if you're working with someone that has the right strategies and knows how to price. As a buyer, if you just put yourself in a buyer's position, as a seller, if you were buying, you're going to be looking online at all the properties. So if you see a property that is higher priced, you've got all the pictures and everything right there. It can be devastating to the results that you're going to see.
Absolutely.
So what about with the multiple offer? How is pricing affecting in getting multiple offers, more than one person that's coming in and bidding on that home?
How is pricing affected? Well, it's like anything. If you go in a fish tank with a piece of meat, you're going to have all the fish swarm to that attractive piece of meat. And that's what you want in that multiple offer frenzy, because then the seller really has options and choices. And you're going to get the buyers emotionally vested in that home. And at that point, they're going to be willing to pay more than they would have if the home were sitting on market for a couple weeks with no offers in hand.
Makes total sense. I love that visual. You would think that would really bring it to a point on how pricing is important. So what other marketing tips do the two of you have for people that are selling right now? Because I think a lot of sellers just think it's easy and they're going to make a lot of money. But you may make a lot of money, but you can make a lot more money and get a higher profit if you do everything right.
Exactly. In a fast-paced market, it's not you just throw a sign in the yard and you put it on our multiple listing service and it goes out to everybody. It's still marketing. Buying a home is such an emotional investment, right? You're buying a house, but you're buying the lifestyle you want to live in that house.
Yes.
And the analogy I always have with my clients is candles. I love candles, right? You can buy candles anywhere. I can go to Target and get them for $5, or I can go to Nordstrom's and pay $65 for candles. What would possess somebody to pay $65 for a candle? It's the marketing around it. It's the presentation.
Yes.
It's the emotion that I get with it and all the little extras that they throw into my bag when I go to Nordstrom's and buy this really fun, fancy candle. It's the same principle for your house. How you market it and how you show it makes a big difference in that final amount. That
and all those little things make a difference. And now is the time to do it because you're getting multiple buyers. So even more so than if we're in a different market and it's more of a buyer's market. Because in this market, I think it's even more dangerous because you're getting all of these people that are coming in, and so you've got the opportunity to really get a great price on that home if you do it right.
Absolutely.
Debbie, any marketing?
Well, one of the things I tell my sellers is you get one shot in this market. You get one opportunity to impress the socks out of them. And if you feel that all you can do is just kind of go as is in this market, that just simply does not work. I would say on average, I spend a good month up to 45 days of getting a home prepped, collaborating with my seller, collaborating with my contractors and other resources to really make the home shine.
Okay, and you're a staging expert. I mean, so you do a lot with educating your clients on how to stage their homes.
Correct. I really feel that the power of staging is absolutely critical, and folks that aren't doing that, please at least close your toilet lids. When I look at photos and see open toilet lids, it drives me nuts.
Wow.
There's little things that you can do that don't cost a lot of money, and then there's, you can invest more dollars, and that staging, we know statistically, will typically earn you about 125% return.
I was just going to ask you if there's some type of statistics or something that really is going to bring up that profit on the home. So what about brokers opens? And explain for somebody, a listener that doesn't know what a broker's open is.
So a broker's open, on the weekends we have public open houses. The broker's opens are during the week, and it's an opportunity for the agents to come in and view the home. Our market is moving so fast, it's not really that effective for a seller. It's fine if you do it, but the reality is if an agent has a buyer, they're not waiting for the broker's open to see it. They are getting in there with that buyer right away so that they have first opportunity to look at it.
I think in the old days, brokers' opens were very well attended because that was prior to the MLS, where listings came out on a weekly book. Can you imagine having to look at a book where it was black and white?
I could not imagine your job if you had to do that.
Count at that point.
It was
no
every
photos.
2 weeks.
Yeah,
so imagine how old that inventory or the information was.
Exactly.
By the time it got out there.
And in today's market, with the sheer speed, the crazy hours that we realtors keep, most people, including agents, we are looking online. And brokers' opens simply aren't that well attended, so we rarely do them. If you have a property that you think will be well attended and you're looking for specifically broker feedback, maybe it's a good thing to do, but not critical.
Yeah, it makes total sense. What about contingencies? I mean, there's a lot of contingencies that are involved. I mean, what is, from a seller's point of view, how are you educating or coaching them on contingencies?
That's one of the other benefits if you can generate multiple offers, because your offer is about price but also terms.
Yes.
In multiple offers, you can remove many of those contingencies. Because the buyers are competing and they need to be more competitive.
Okay. So what would be an example of that, Nicole?
We're seeing inspection contingencies come out of the contract. Okay. Either a seller has done a pre-listing inspection, so the buyer is able to use that, which has been very, very effective. Some buyers are even going in and doing an inspection prior to submitting their offer because listings are having offer review timeframes. So they put a house on the market on, say, a Thursday, and then they review offers the next Wednesday. So that gives the seller the opportunity to get full exposure from the market, and then the buyers can come in and do their inspections ahead of time and then remove that contingency from the contract.
And I know you guys were in a mentoring class with top agents and really strategizing and coming up with the best best plans and finding out what's working and what's not working. What other contingencies, Debbie? Did you because you brought some into the mentoring group?
Yeah, well, 40% of our transactions right now are all cash. So the benefit to the seller at that point is that you're removing automatically the appraisal contingency and the risk that a loan might be denied or that borrower or buyer might have a job change or a credit change. So all cash is very, very attractive despite the end of the day, whether they have a loan or cash. It's kind of the same impact to a seller financially, but you're removing those contingencies, which is so very powerful. It's a great position to be in for a seller.
So anything else when you're looking at all of these offers? Let's say that you've got 5 in some situations. I mean, I've heard ridiculous, like 20 offers on a home. I mean, how in the heck it's interesting, Tina.
Almost always in that multiple offer craze, there will be one that kind of stands out from the rest.
Okay.
Whether it's because they do an escalator and that escalator amount is so much higher than everybody else, or it's all cash and they're removing contingencies. But frankly, the last listing I had where we had 14 offers, what made that offer stand out is A, that broker. The broker was very powerful and strong. And B, they came to me with a correct contract. So often I will get contracts that are sloppy, hard to read, and all kinds of boo-boos on them. And it just makes me not want to work with that party.
Because then you know what's going to happen throughout the next 30 days or whatever they're going to be closing. And the biggest issue in the process is the representation on financing and on the real estate side, and whether that process is going to be smooth, and even more important, whether or not it's actually going to come to completion.
Exactly.
So what about pictures, and how they're presenting this on the multiple listing service?
Professional photos, I think, are absolutely critical. I think brokers out there that are not doing that or taking photos with their cell phone cameras are really doing a disservice.
We were just talking about that earlier, Ian. Go ahead, Debbie. Sorry.
Yeah, really doing a disservice to the seller. Again, that as is, you're not painting a visual appealing photo for the buyer to come in, and then the professional photos you're going to be able to Photoshop. You're going to be able to get blue skies, and if you have a wide angle lens, it's really going to get a sense of the space.
So go ahead, Nicole.
Oh, I was just going to say it's really your first showing is when they look at those pictures and they decide whether or not to get in the car and come see you. It's interesting. I was with a client yesterday and they were a buyer, and there was a new listing that popped up. And in our multiple listing service, you can put up to 25 pictures.
Really?
Of the house there. Yes.
Wow.
This house, they were professional pictures, but they were only 6 of them.
Why would they do that?
I don't know, but my client's comment, it's interesting to know the buyer perception is there's something wrong with that house if they could only get 6 decent pictures. We don't have to go.
Well, and that's interesting because, why would you only take 6 pictures unless you don't want to show anything else in the house?
Right. So buyers put a lot of weight in those pictures. You know, what they look like, the quality of the pictures, how many pictures there are, if there are key things missing. If you happen to forget to take a picture of the kitchen, they're going to assume there's a reason you didn't take a picture of that kitchen.
So it is so important in any area in money, and all the guests I bring in studio, a lot of experts in a lot of different areas, but I say all the time, it's just so important to have the right representation. I'm going to bring that right back. We're going to take it to commercial right now. Coming up next, we're going to continue our conversation for all of you sellers listening to the show right now. But if you're a buyer as well, you want to stay tuned because it's important that you understand on the seller side, because it'll help you figure out how to get into the best position and get your offer accepted. Nicole Mangina with Windermere Real Estate and Debbie Walter with Remax Northwest Realtors right here on 1150 AM KKNW after this short break.
This is the Money Hour with your host, Tina Mitchell, on Alternative Talk, AM 1150. Now, back to the show with local mortgage and finance expert, Tina Mitchell.
Welcome back to the Money Hour with your host and mortgage expert, Tina Mitchell, right here on 1150 AM KKNW, the Saturday, May 24th show. I'm dedicated to my listeners, providing you with the tools needed to make informed decisions on matters that affect your money. If you're hearing my show on a different time or day, you're listening to a rebroadcast, but we're here to answer any questions or connect you with any of my guests that I have in studio. Please call the show 1-855 400-1150. Again, it's 1-855-400-1150 or online at themoneyhour.com. And in studio, I have Nicole Mangina with Windermere Real Estate and Debbie Walters with RE/MAX. And we're talking about the seller side of a real estate transaction. And before we left for a break, I was going to ask the two of you, we're talking about the seller maybe not understanding the urgency or the importance to do things extra special as if you would in any other market. It doesn't matter that we're low on inventory and there's tons of buyers. You still want to maximize your profit. But it's important to talk about your representation as well, because there's a lot of realtors out there that don't do a very good job for many reasons. Maybe they just don't know that they're not doing a very good job. And having that representation on the other side and on your side as the seller is really important. So let's talk. I want to just shift over for just 1 second on the buyer. So obviously you've got to have good representation and know the strategies to make you the best seller. But what about a buyer and their agent representation coming in these multiple offer scenarios? How much does that have a decision making if you're on the listing side representing the seller?
Knowing the buyer's agent?
Yeah, the reputation of the buyer's agent.
It's substantial. You know, the seller is worried about the buyer themselves, right? They want to know that the buyer loves their house and is committed to it and committed to the transaction. As real estate agents, we're concerned about the lender. We want to know that the transaction will close on time, that the loan will. But we put a lot of weight in that buyer's agent in terms of their ability to be professional and make sure things move along as they're supposed to.
Just as you said, Debbie, about, crossing the T's and dotting the I's. So if somebody's listening right now and they're a seller, what should they be asking their realtor that they need to be doing in making sure that they're picking that right buyer?
I would say that in this market, you really want an agent that is doing at least 20 transactions a year or very close to that. And if they've got at least 5 to plus years in the business, because then they have survived and maybe even thrived during the economic downturn. You don't want an agent that's coming from a place of desperation financially themselves, because then they're maybe not apt to give you the very best advice. And you really want a broker agent that is going to be very strategic in their advice.
Makes total sense. So let's talk about a little bit of the negotiation on the seller side, because there's some things that are going on in the contract. We talk about contingencies and removing some of those, but when they're going back and they're doing some of that negotiation, let's say that there's not really maybe a multiple offer situation, because if you're not right in the market, you might be in an area that's out a little bit, and they're doing some negotiation with the buyer. What are suggestions and tips that you have in that arena?
Well, if somebody comes in and really asks and cares about the seller situation, just recently I had a pregnant client who was 9 months pregnant, high risk. What was most important to her is that she have a 60-day rent back after we closed on the purchase, so that she could stay in our home, have the baby, and then have time to move into her new home. So that was really critical. That was more critical than actual price. And ultimately, we had multiple offers, and we picked a lower price offer, but we picked the buyer that gave her the flexibility to stay in her home post-closing and rent back.
And that's a really good example to share, that just understanding, and that goes back to the agent as well, understanding what's important to the seller and what their needs are, because you got one shot to go in there and make this offer, and you want to make sure that you're structuring it and being strategic around the seller's needs. So what about things that the seller might be asking and adding in addition that they might be able to get from the buyer in this market?
You mean over and above, like a rent back or?
Correct. Anything else?
The biggest things I'm seeing are the price. The price is just going up. The post-closing rent back, where the seller is able to stay at no cost to the seller.
Okay.
I'm seeing that. Not seeing a whole lot beyond that.
A couple ones that I've had is where the seller is an estate sale, and the properties had a lot of things, whether it be old toys, a non-working car, a wood pile, just a lot of junk that needed to be removed. And in the multiple offer situation, my buyer said, hey, we will take care of all the junk. You can just leave it as is. And that was a situation where we weren't the highest buyer money-wise, but we got it because my buyer was going to spend about $500 to get rid of the junk.
Yeah.
And that is what helped them stand out.
And there's all these little, all these little things. And also you guys had mentioned at the mentoring session about the home warranty and getting an addendum or extension with that provides it for the seller as well. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, especially on a vacant property. There's home warranty companies out there that will warrant the house if anything were to break down either during the listing period or the first year of ownership for the new buyer. If the new buyer comes in with an offer that says, hey, I will pay that home warranty and cover you, Mr. Seller, during the entire listing period and closing period, and I get the benefit as the buyer of having a 1-year coverage, that sometimes the cost might be $400 to $500 to the buyer, but now you're providing peace of mind for that seller, especially if it's an older home or an estate sale or an as-is where there's more apt to be issues.
Makes total sense. And what's $400 to $500 when you're, when you're getting your offer accepted in this environment? So what about escalation clauses and all this crazy stuff that's going on in the contract for the buyers to be more competitive? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, the escalation clause is you come in at a certain price, and then you do your escalation clause. And the way the contract reads, it says that the seller has to show you proof of the other offer, and you will beat that other offer by X amount of dollars up to whatever your maximum is. And it's interesting. I'm seeing lots of strategies out there. I think one of the most important things buyers need to know when they are competing in a multiple offer situation is the message that their contract sends. And price is a perfect example. Let's say a house is priced at $500, and a buyer will come in and say, we want to come in at $475, but we'll do an escalator clause to $525. The message you just sent to the seller is you really don't want to pay that much money, and you're going to spend the entire time in escrow trying to nickel and dime them to get that money back. May not be the case, but usually what they'll do is they'll start at full price and then come up and say maybe we'll beat the offer by $5,000, up to a certain amount. It needs to be a big enough dollar amount that it makes a difference for the seller.
Yeah, I find it really annoying if a contract comes in and the buyer says, hey, I'll beat the next guy by $500. I mean, that just says that, I don't know, it says maybe financially you can't afford to really buy this house. So I think if you're using escalator clauses, it should at least be several $1,000s more, because then the seller is more apt to select your offer if maybe you don't have something that's as strong. Maybe you wanted the refrigerator and the seller didn't really want to give the refrigerator, but you're willing to beat the other offer by $5,000. Well, at that point, the seller will probably pick your offer, get the $5,000, and leave the refrigerator behind.
Makes total sense. And Nicole, in hearing what you said, and I think it's so important, and people don't think about it, especially on the seller side and the buyer side, you in the industry do. But the importance of looking at that contract to see if this buyer is going to actually be nitpicking things that are coming up after that process. So what's another example of that you're able to look in the contract and see, well, you know what, I don't think this is really going to be the strongest in continuing to move forward?
The biggest thing we look at is timeframes. An inspection, if you are getting a contract submitted that has an inspection contingency, the default in the time frame in the contract is 10 days. A seller does not want to be hanging out there for 10 days after mutual acceptance, hoping that they're moving.
Exactly.
Especially in a 30-day close, they need time to pack. So doing something as simple as just shortening that to 3 to 5 business days can make a huge difference. That tells the seller that you're committed, that you really want the property, and that you are also invested in moving forward and expediting things for everybody involved. And
what about the inspection of, adding the as-is in there? Are you guys are you doing that where they're having the inspection, but they're adding in there that it's an as is, so they're not going to actually ask for anything. They just want to see what the house has to offer, but they still have the ability to get out, but there's no in between. It's either stay in or stay out. I don't see that too much. What I say is I advise all my sellers to do a pre-inspection for many different reasons. I think it's very, very powerful. And at that point, most buyers are going to use that pre-inspection report to feel like the house has been checked out and that all main things are dealt with. And then at that point, you're completely eliminating that inspection contingency altogether. Makes total sense. Yeah. Now, what outside of price, because we know that's probably the biggest issue, the biggest mistake that a seller can make, right? Mm-hmm. Outside of price, what other mistakes can a seller make that's going to affect the profit that they're going to receive on their home? Underestimating the value of staging. I think staging and professional pictures, it goes so far and does so much.
thinking that grandmother's rocking chair with the 1909 quilt sitting on top of it is going to appeal to today's 35 hip, very contemporary style. So even if you're occupying the home and it is of older nature or older style, please don't take offense that we as professional realtors, brokers come in and want to kind of tweak that style, because people are visual.
Yes.
Buyers more so than anybody, and they get turned on by very little things, very few things, and they get turned off by even fewer things.
Yeah, it makes total sense.
It sounds silly, and we're going into summer, so it doesn't really apply, but in the winter, leave your heat on during the day. There's nothing worse than showing a house and seeing your breath inside.
Yeah, because we all want to leave and go back to our warm cars.
That makes sense. And so what about with the price or accepting the offers? Because I know that you guys have some real strategies, and you wouldn't think, again, I'm as a seller, who cares? Just give me an offer. But it really isn't quite that easy when you're trying to strategically, representing the seller, maximize those prices that are coming in. So talk about when you're accepting contracts in that process.
I typically try to come on market on a Wednesday or Thursday and then have all offers to be submitted for review on a Monday, maybe like at the end of the business day, 5 p.m., knowing that by the time we get all signed around, it might go into Tuesday morning. That does a couple things. We have a fiduciary responsibility per the MLS to really make sure that the properties are maximized, exposed properly. Then it also allows us to do the open houses on both a Saturday and Sunday. So you're bringing in bodies, you're bringing in energy, and you're giving everybody time to do what they got to do with their lenders and possibly their inspectors.
Makes total sense. Nicole?
Yeah, I agree. I think maximizing that market time is huge.
Yeah. So anything else that you guys are dealing with that can be helpful for either on the buyer side or seller side with my listeners?
The biggest thing is really the point of making sure you stage, professionally photograph, and understanding that you get one shot out of the gate to make it right.
Makes total sense. And let's talk about my side. I am a mortgage professional. That's what I do full time. I just hang out in the studio here to do my weekly show. So on the lending side, what's important for a seller to make sure that they're looking at from that lender and that pre-approval letter?
The letter especially, we've talked about a clear title and appraisal. Those are certainly acceptable contingencies. But whenever I get a letter and it's subject to income and asset verification, and I know, like you talked about, you do it one last time.
Sure.
But there are a lot of letters out there that make it sound like it hasn't been done.
Exactly. And it hasn't.
Exactly. And it sounds so silly, but a lender who will either answer the phone or return my phone call. Because again, as a listing agent, I'm concerned about whether or not that lender, especially if it's not somebody I know, that they are going to complete it in a timely manner. I always call the lender. For every offer that comes in. You would be amazed at how many have never returned my phone calls.
Unbelievable. What about a guarantee? A guarantee on closing to back up their work to make sure that it's going to move forward.
I think that's huge.
Yeah.
Especially on the date. I mean, I'm sure both run into situations where you get to 2 days before closing and the lender calls and says, oh gosh, we need 2 more weeks.
Yes. Which can be a nightmare. Yes. Debbie?
And not only the phone call at the time of the offer, because I agree, very rarely will the lenders call me back that I call, but as a loan professional, if you can save me the phone call, be proactive, talk to me, call me, brag about your client, because even though the broker may have, maybe I don't necessarily believe that broker, or maybe that broker isn't able to answer some specific questions I have. But if you, as the loan officer, call me, that's going to give me a lot of confidence that your borrower can fulfill the obligations in a timely manner. But not just at that time, really throughout the transaction, because I end up spending a lot of time every week kind of babysitting that whole process. And so if a mortgage professional can be proactive in a weekly communication with me, that I can then forward to my seller, it just reassures us that we're all going to close on time.
Makes total sense. Thank you so much for coming in, both of you. It was fun to have a 3-way conversation here with us, and I just appreciate so much that you're doing in our local market with our sellers and buyers, and the education that you provide for other agents. You guys are really real leaders in the industry, and I'm just proud to say that I know you.
Oh, well,
Thank
Tina, you rock.
Thank you. And this is your host and mortgage expert, Tina Mitchell, signing off for the day. I will be back next weekend, and so I'm excited to to be back here in studio. And I appreciate all of you that are listening to the show. I hope you're having a great weekend. And like me, I'm working, but I hope you're doing something and enjoying the long weekend that we're having. 11:50 a.m. KKNW, and I'll talk with you next weekend.